Hi, I'm Katie, host of Focus and Flourish podcast. I used to grind nonstop until I figured out how to automate my systems that ended up helping me achieve a 4-day work week. Now I earn more and work less. Want to do the same? Grab my free 6-figure strategy guide, which is the exact blueprint I used to grow my own business to where I am today. Link in the show notes. Are you new here? Tap subscribe to support the show and never miss an episode. Welcome, everybody. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Andrea Shah. She is a copywriter and marketing consultant who helps photographers and wedding professionals and educators craft website copy that resonates with their dream clients, that really speaks to who they are, who they serve, what they do. She has a background in languages and translation, so she brings a really unique perspective to copywriting, focusing on, voice, tone, personality, and the nuances that make each brand really stand out, right? So her approach ensures that your website's not just another tab or someone bouncing off really fast, but something that actually captures the attention of the people that you want to work with. And so as a photographer who has been doing this for so long, website copy was not something that was being talked about very much for photographers a decade ago. You could have this stunning portfolio, a contact page, an artist's bio, and be good to go. And things have really, really shifted. Our voice, our brand is absolutely essential to standing out. This is one of the most saturated industries in the United States. So huge stuff here. And if writing feels overwhelming to you, I think this is going to be so helpful because Andrea's really good at breaking things down into more digestible pieces of ideas to process. So I am so excited you're here. Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So I thought a good place to start would be for you to, include any other parts about, yourself and what you do. And I'd love to dive in and hear it from a pro. What is the importance of website copy? Not everyone listening may know that.
Yeah. And I'm happy to just dive right in and start there. Your website copy gives context to your photographic work. You create these amazing images, and we all hear that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And of course, when you're looking back at your memories, it is. But when you're selling your work, you need to go a little bit beyond that and give your clients and potential clients the context to talk about your work, the way to describe and recommend to a friend maybe what it's like to work with you, not just the imagery, although that's hugely important, but also the experience you create for people. Because as you move into a more luxurious market, it's not just about the pictures, it's always about the person behind the camera and the experience they create for your clients. And so the words give your images a context in which they exist. So these are what I produce out of the work we're going to do together.
Amazing. I love that. And so I know we've talked in the past, and I would love to hear a little more about how your website copy can kind of act as your silent salesperson, so to speak.
Yes. And first of all, the first thing it can do is through SEO, it can get people to find you who might not otherwise have heard of you. That's one of the important things your copy should be optimized for, is if someone goes and searches, I'm near Miami. So if someone searches newborn photographer in Miami, you want to be plugged in and ready to go so that you show up in their search for that, because people still use Google. And also, really importantly, the AI tools, whether it's ChatGPT or the AI overviews in Google, are also pulling data from websites. So you want to make sure your website is also optimized for those to find you. And then once people get to your website, or maybe they've seen your images on Instagram, they've seen you on TikTok, wherever else they might find you, your website copy is going to walk them through the experience of working with you, and also just give an indication of who the person is that they're going to be working with, because the relationship between a photographer and a client is kind of an intimate one, especially in weddings, birth photography, family photography. We find ourselves in these one-on-one or small group settings where comfort is paramount. And if you don't have a sense of who's behind the camera, you might not feel comfortable showing up 1 week postpartum or showing up on a wedding day where complex family dynamics are at play.
Right. Really well said. Yeah, it's true. And I think that it also will kind of force creatives and photographers to check in with, what is my client experience? What do I do with my process that's different from other photographers, or what can I do? Like maybe getting some of those, I'm assuming you've had clients come to you who maybe didn't even know where to start.
Yes, exactly. Figuring out what it is that makes you different and positioning you within your market, because unless you are in a very small town, in which case you're probably going to have a small pool of clientele to draw from, the chances are your market is, if not saturated, pretty active with photographers. And you need to find out what makes people come to you, what draws them to you. And the reality is, it's there in your work. It is almost certainly there in your reviews, especially if you've been in the industry for a while. Your clients are telling you, or they're willing to tell you, why they love you and your work and your client experience. But sometimes the copywriter is like the person who goes in and digs and finds that information, because it can be really challenging to do it yourself. It can be difficult to ask those questions, and it can be difficult to see the patterns that are really obvious to another person. I can look at someone's reviews and go, oh, everyone's saying this about you. And you never told me, because you never really realized you were doing that amazing thing.
Wow, I love that. So when a photographer hires you and they seem a little bit, lost, like I don't really know where to start, what is your process to open them up and start learning? And other than your own research, but with them, what are some questions that you ask to start sort of diving into what sets them apart and, their unique value?
So I do, some of it is quote unquote professional, and some of it's a little bit more personal. So I'll ask you about your childhood. I really want to know how you got started in photography, but I also really want to know your story beyond photography, because so often what makes a photographer compelling to work with is something beyond just photography. It's something, maybe a job they've had before, a caregiving role they play in their own life, artistic influences. So I ask about all of that. I also ask a lot of silly little questions, because we never know what's going to reveal something amazing. So I'll ask, what's your toxic trait? Or what is the thing that irritates you the most? And part of that is just designed to get you to open up a little bit more too, so that when we do those big life questions, you don't feel overwhelmed. And I always tell people, when you're working with a copywriter, it is okay to, for lack of a more elegant expression, word vomit. I am not expecting you to sit there and type out elegant paragraphs about yourself. Babble. It's all raw material for me. It's right. Like delivering a big block of marble to a sculptor. I'll work from there. You just give me the foundations. And then we'll also walk through your process and your client experience. And that's where I'm digging a little bit to find out what you might be doing differently on a more business-oriented side of things, to find out, how to make your business stand out.
I love that. So client support guides, like how you walk them through your approach and pricing, things like that. So what happens when someone is brand new and they're just getting started, but they genuinely just need help with that? Do you kind of go more towards the personal stuff to help bring out their personality as they're growing?
Yes, and I also think we think about what ideal clients you might want to work with. So it does, of course, all start from the foundation of who your ideal client is, not just their demographics, but their deeper interests and desires and where you resonate. And then when you're early on in your business, you accept that it might change. And that's often a time for doing it yourself, or doing it with someone and hiring someone maybe just to edit your work, or using a template, because you deserve good copy. At the same time, it's very common in the first year or two of your business to start out, think you know exactly who you want to work with, and quickly learn that maybe it's a little bit different. So we don't want you to invest immensely in copy that's not going to serve you a year down the road. So there's a balancing act. And I always tell people, with most of my clients, by the time they reach me, they've built a successful business on the back of copy. They DIY'd. Maybe they used a little AI support. Maybe they used a template. But they've built it with something they've done themselves, and now it's time for the next evolution.
Right. Yeah, that's really, I did not hire a copywriter in my first couple of years, so I'll just leave it.
Yeah. And I want everyone to feel empowered to do their own DIY, because if you invested in professional everything when you started your business, from brand photos to websites to accounting, you would be $50,000 in debt before you booked one client.
Right. Yeah, you'll have to start somewhere and strategically begin investing in these parts of marketing and branding, right? So before I was educating myself on the different kinds of copy that were really important for my own websites, I kind of always thought of it as the about page and services and all these pieces. And over time, obviously, have really understood, okay, there's a really big difference in SEO driven copy that are simple, completely there just so Google can find you. And then copy that, uses, values and storytelling and, your tone and vibe. So do those all, in your opinion, can you speak to that? Like, do they fall under one umbrella for you as people learn, or do you actually kind of guide people on, you do both in one service, or how does that work?
I want to do both in one service whenever possible, but some pages are going to be a little bit more search oriented. So I have some clients that I work with, especially elopement photographers, where we'll create a page centered around a specific location.
Okay, awesome. So I can't help but think about the different kinds of copy because I didn't really know the difference between storytelling and SEO driven copy and all of that before I started, educating myself. So I would love for you to share more with our audience about the difference between, copywriting that infuses storytelling and tone and really brands someone versus copy that is totally driven towards SEO or search engine optimization and those types of things.
Yeah, and when I'm writing a page, I am generally trying to weave both together. So you do have a lot of storytelling, you do have the sales psychology and the focus on selling in general, but we take those little keywords that you want to be found for and we weave them into the copy. And sometimes it's really bland. Sometimes what I often do is a little headline in small text at the top of your page that says Nashville newborn photographer. And then we have a pretty tagline below that in bigger text that actually captures more of what you do. But at the same time, the one with your keyword is properly tagged so that Google can read that and Ping knows, okay, this is for someone who's searching for a Nashville newborn photographer. Because telling them that, you turn the little snuggles into magical memories or whatever. And I'm not an on-the-spot copywriter. I can't do this on the spot. But that's not going to help people find you. That's going to help people maybe decide to buy you. That's going to connect that's going to speak to their emotions and make them understand why it's worth paying $1,000 to get in your studio for a short session and go from there. But it's not going to tell Google anything. I always say we're writing for real people, but we are also writing for robots because the robots are really important and they like things as dry as unbuttered toast. So we got to kind of give it to them and layer the page. There's some of both.
Exactly. And that's how we've done it on all my sites where there's an SEO driven piece of copy. And then on some pages, we have that in H1 and it's a really bold statement, Napa Valley wedding photography team or something and even though that was hard for me to digest because I'm such a flowery writer, when I first started learning all of this, it just is such a game changer. My copywriter obviously taught me all of this as well. So I would love to hear more about sort of how your clients and how you kind of help them not only with their website copy, but is the process also supporting them in learning how to create valuable content for their audience or infuse this more intentional tone into their client guides, their pricing, their folios, things like that?
Yes, and I want to emphasize that as you move towards, and I don't want to open up the whole argument about what's luxury and what's not luxury, but as you move towards charging pricing that is sustainable for you, which is probably going to be towards the luxury end, you need to have a consistent tone of voice in your client experience and a really just uniform. You can have personality, but it needs to be uniform at every touch point so that they don't feel like they're communicating with 7 different people behind the scenes, especially if you're a personal brand, because as a personal brand, they're hiring you for you. They're not hiring you to then be swapped out to talk to someone else who doesn't feel like you. And sometimes there is an assistant, there is a VA, there is someone behind the scenes, but you still want to make sure that there's that consistency of voice throughout.
Right. And in general, what would you say are some like effective copy strategies you can share with us, or ways that, copy can really support business transformation?
So one of the things I want to remind people to do is to focus more on your reader than on yourself. And that means more you and less we or I. It's so useful to go through your copy and look at the sentences that start with I or the sentences that start with we and say, is there any way I can turn this into a statement that's focused on them? And sometimes, no, you can't say about, for example, your formal photography training, you can't turn that into a you sentence. But some other things where you're saying, I create an experience where, how can you turn that into a you sentence? Because there's no nice way to say it. We're all selfish. We're all asking the question, what's in it for me? And too many I's and we's make it feel a little bit like a cover letter for a job that's not what you're trying to achieve. So that's one of my favorite strategies to share with people. And another thing I like to tell people to do, and this is veering from copy into design, it's kind of at the overlap of the two, but break your copy up. Don't write enormous long paragraphs. Break it up into shorter paragraphs. Use bold, use underline, use bullet points. I love bullet points.
Right.
But break things up and work with, if you have a web designer, work with them too to do this strategically so that it looks elegant. You don't want to have, purple text here and underline bold there. But a little bit of emphasis and a lot of breaking it up will help move people's eye along the page. And you're writing for two kinds of readers. You have the person who will read every single word that you write, the close readers, and I'm so guilty of this, I'm a skimmer. Yep. I'm going to read your headlines. I'm going to maybe use the Control F for the price sign to find out how much things cost. Maybe I'm going to read the frequently asked questions, and then I'm going to go back if I'm still interested and read everything else. So you want to have those two readers in mind as you're writing. You don't want to just write assuming someone will read every word on your website.
Exactly. And I'm a skimmer too, but then when I like what I'm skimming, that's when I'll pause and start reading the fine print a bit more. And that's what the goal is, right? Having, what would you call them? Headlines or hooks, or what is that sort of in your world?
Yeah, the headlines and the subheadlines just to pull people in. Even if you're working with design, fun little handwritten touches and that sort of thing that can really add some personality, just a word here or a word there to just catch people's attention and show a little wit too as you're writing.
Right. And I have found in my career, my tone has shifted as I've gotten older, as I've gained more experience and realized the types of clients I want. It does not mean that they are not fun and getting on the dance floor, or it's that they want a very seamless, guided, intentional experience, which I would call a luxury offer, right? But it took me a long time to learn how to incorporate a really grounded, professional, and warm tone with some fun, like how I would talk to them on the phone and not have it sound different. So do you sort of, as you're having Zoom meetings and in-person meetings with photographers, do you sort of find ways to keep it really uniquely them when you're working with them?
Yes, and I go and I read everything I can find that you've written. That sounds so creepy. It's not creepy, I promise. It's mostly your Instagram captions, your blog posts if you write them yourself. Even if you've written your current website copy, I'll go back and read it, because whether or not it's serving you well from a position of getting people to, convert, it does show a little bit of how you wrote. So I want to read all those things. It's the same reason I ask questions in a questionnaire. I sit down and talk with someone, because we do want to pull in some vocabulary that's yours. We don't, unless you specifically ask me to, we don't want to create a voice and a website that's completely detached from the person you're going to show up as. Occasionally, there's a reason to do it, but 99% of the time, you're going to want to show up as the person you are, whether you're on a Zoom call or in a session or on your website.
Right. This is sort of all leading up to a topic that we've been talking a lot about in my group coaching program, which is, people are just, it's new that photographers are writing sales pages. I guess you could call it a landing page or whatever you want. But for my businesses, that was in the last 5 years that we moved and migrated to long, more of a long form page that keeps kind of going and going. And I would love to discuss more with you, maybe some tips or some, support for people listening here on, okay, so how can I actually understand my niche positioning? How can I actually sell an experience and not just my packages? What are some of the things that you recommend other than what we've already gone over? If a photographer is going to sit down and try to DIY guiding clients through an experience, aka I just bluntly call this a sales page. Like we have a very specific,
it is what
right.
it is.
We have a very specific page on my main website that's called the Kreate Wedding Photography Experience. And it's a long form sales page geared directly towards brides, even though we also photograph maternity, newborn, family. So that is a very much geared there. So I'm curious what your take on that, how you could guide anyone looking to DIY their first kind of offer, what advice you would give.
Sure. I've got 3 pieces of advice. So the first one is go read your reviews and find out, look for those common patterns, the nice things people are saying about you, and the language that they use, not just the substance of their comments, although that's so important, but also the language that they use to do it, because you're going to want to pull in a little bit of that. Your website is really a Venn diagram between their language and your language, and you need to have those 2 circles overlapping in your copy. The second is take a look at your competitors and see not so much what they're doing in terms of like, how can I copy this, but where is there a gap? What are they not talking about that you do? What are you doing that's so unique to you that maybe everyone else does it, but they're not talking about it, or maybe it's completely unique to you. Either way, at least for a while, it's a little gap in the market you can carve out, and maybe a year from now, you need to shift your focus a little bit because everyone's like, oh, that's brilliant. I'm going to start talking about that too. But to find those things, my third point is take a notebook and a pen. Do this on paper. I think it'll work better for most people. And write down every single step of your process. It's annoying, but think about what you do, let's say from the time someone inquires all the way through to the very last contact you have with them. Write down all those steps. It's a lot, but in there you're going to find unique or interesting things you do. I would say leave room to surprise and delight people. If you send wonderful client gifts, you don't have to mention that you send wonderful client gifts. That's a surprise and delight. But I think if you go through that process, you'll realize that you're doing some things that you can pull out and highlight on your website. Maybe it's that you have an amazing styling closet you've been putting together for 10 years. People want to know about that.
Exactly. That's a great example. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or maybe it's that you have half a dozen makeup artists that you can recommend to someone that you have great working relationships with. These sorts of things are pieces of your process you want to pull out and emphasize. And going back and looking also at your reviews and what your competitors do will also kind of help you hone in on the things that you're doing that you're not emphasizing enough at this point.
Exactly. And I love those examples. When I started sharing more on the brand photography side of things, that we had access to a beautiful urban studio at about half the cost of what it would be, I started booking more of those sessions.
Yeah.
Because
that's
people
a brilliant example.
She's got a great, and it's like sometimes feels a little weird, but that is essentially a very unique, small circumstance that not anyone else is going to have. Right?
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Now I really want to book you for brand photos because that's incredible. That's exactly the sort of detail that, or maybe you came to newborn photography, but in a previous, life, you were a NICU nurse or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Great asset for photography. If you want to stray from the tried and true stories a little bit, so you don't necessarily want to say I became a wedding photographer because I liked getting married and then I thought I could do this and that, because that's just a common story. But usually if you start digging, you'll find the answer to how you can position yourself in your market.
Exactly. And I'm a researcher and I have done tons of research on these topics. And so when I started, building my online course about 4 years ago, I started really looking at mid-range photography websites across the US. And it's like, I think about 90% of them had the same bio. My grandfather gave me a film camera when I was 14 and it's all about them, and it's all about like, yes, the spark that got them here, but like couldn't be, I hate to say it in this way, but if anyone's listening here wondering how to get away from that story, this is when it's time to start digging deeper so that you can actually speak to the client. Maybe it starts with an adventurous shoot that you had and what like was so exhilarating about it, and that it brought you back to maybe a one-liner about your first time shooting or something like that. But then it's making it about the client, envisioning what it would be like to work with you through a story and sensory adjectives and all of those things. So I loved your advice of sitting down and writing absolutely everything down.
Everything. And I mean, you know, even a little journaling about it can really help to ask yourself the whys of how you got into the business too. Mm-hmm. And there are occasionally, I don't want to also drag on anyone, there are occasionally wedding related stories that are relevant. I just worked with a client who is an elopement photographer, and a huge part of her shift towards elopements was because she was planning to have a regular wedding in 2020, and you know, the rest is history. And so for her, that is really important to put out there. But you're right that there's a lot of my grandfather gave me a camera stories, and even that story can be told a little bit more interestingly. Like, maybe you took that camera and you photographed your My Little Pony dolls in little dioramas. Okay, that's something fun we can run with, you know, right. But we want to run with a little bit deeper. Just you've been interested in photography for a long time. And I do think, and this kind of takes me to the topic of what got them there won't necessarily get you there, which is that there are people in the luxury market in particular who have very minimalist websites. Maybe they have a paragraph of copy about themselves, maybe an artist's statement. And I think a lot of times we try to emulate these people, and they are doing business differently, especially if they've been in the game for a long time. They have referrals. They have the SEO that comes from just having had the same domain name for 20 years. They're not looking to get clients the same way you're likely looking to get clients. And so you cannot necessarily emulate the way they write their copy or the minimal amount of their copy and expect the same results.
That is incredibly good advice. I love that. And before we wrap up, I would love to touch on bio strategy. You know, last time we spoke, it really hit home for me of like, okay, share just enough to connect with them, but still keep it about them. Yeah. So what are what can you leave us all with on strategies to have a compelling bio?
So I would think about what you share with your ideal clients. And I mean, sometimes it's easy just to sit down and think of the last 3 people you loved working with, not just people that you did work with, but people you really loved working with. And think about what you had in common with them, whether it is personality traits or interests. There are people out there in the industry who will talk about they largely work with dog people because it's an immediate point of connection. You know, they're able to say, here's my dog. They're on a Zoom call going, here's my dog. And the other person says, here's my dog. And they're immediately bonding. So think of what those things are that you immediately bond with people over and share them. And you can also share, I like to see a little bit of quirkiness when you're sharing facts about yourself. So don't just say that you like margaritas. Margaritas are phenomenal. We all like margaritas. But nobody's going to remember that. Instead, say that your guilty pleasure is, I don't know, chocolate-covered potato chips from Trader Joe's. Okay, that's going to stick in my head a little bit more than margaritas. You want to, yes, and it's also relatable. It is okay also to show just the tiniest bit of relatability. You know, I think sometimes we feel like we all have to be professional and at a remove, but 1 or 2 really relatable moments, junk food, especially I think if you're a family photographer, newborn photographer, anything like that, and you have a family of your own and you can connect over some little relatable fact in there, will really build a connection with your ideal clients.
100%. So basically making the connection that you can relate to, I'm just repeating back to you, make the connection that you have in common with your ideal clients, and then flip it and make it about them.
Yes.
I see you, I get you. Like, okay, I love that.
A lot of times
so
it's
much.
I see you, I've been in your shoes, you know, that sort of thing. If you have walked in their shoes, obviously that's not the case for everyone, and that's completely okay. But if you have walked in their shoes at their stage of life, it can be useful to share a story that will be relevant to them.
I love that. Amazing. So tell everybody where we can find you. I will be linking all of this in the show notes.
Absolutely. So you can find me at andreashah.com, which is my website. And then I'm also on Instagram and Threads as Andrea Shah Copy, and I'm always there to chat.
I love it. Perfect. Well, we'll have another chat as things progress, maybe later in the year, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
If you found this episode helpful, I would love it if you could leave a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Your feedback helps us reach more people who are looking to transform their own photography businesses. Thank you so much for your support.